What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you today. We had early sleepers yesterday. We're doing some way too early bust candidates. Some guys that we think are going too high in ADP or guys that we're just flat out avoiding altogether, players to avoid, so to speak. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, as always, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. We're on that race to 3,500 by the end of the month. We'd appreciate if you could help us get there. Danny, how you doing today?
Yeah, doing well. And I get it. This video is going to be controversial. There's going to be stands of some of these players in the comment section talking about how they're the best thing since sliced bread. But give us a chance. Let us talk about the objective facts that we brought here today and tell you why these guys at their current ADPs, at their current values, are simply overvalued. So anyways, that being said, gonna hit the intro on y'all. Okay, so start off with the first player, Corey, and this is the one that's going to ruffle some feathers because we've already seen reports this offseason on Twitter. People are back in on this guy. They're ready to get their slice of Joe Mixon.
Right, yeah, Joe Mixon, we're starting hot right out of the gate. It's the reason I don't like Joe Mixon at his current value. By the way, his current value is 15th overall. So you have to pick this guy as a borderline first-round pick, RB12 overall. To me, it's the same old song and dance with Joe Mixon every single year. The truthers spend all offseason talking him up. He's this guy that has top 5 running back upside. The season begins, and not only does he prove that he doesn't have top 5 upside, he's downright bad to start the season. Most of the time, his fantasy owners are absolutely enraged by week 3, and probably every Joe Mixon truther in the comments right now is saying this year's different. Joe Mixon's alone in that backfield. Gio Bernard is gone. He's going to get a 3-down workload. They didn't add anybody in the offseason. Here's my thinking about it. Do not think like a fantasy player. Everybody's going to think like a fantasy player with Joe Mixon. But as an NFL fan, do we seriously think that Zach Taylor is sitting in, his mansion right now somewhere going, you know what I should do? Give my running back, who only played 6 games last year due to nagging injuries, and he's never played 16 games in his entire career outside of 1 year. Should I give that guy more volume? Does that sound like a good idea? I just don't think that Zach Taylor is that stupid. I think he knows that Joe Mixon is a guy that probably can't handle an entire workload and needs, a complimentary third down back. Maybe it's even a banger or something. And maybe Chris Evans is that guy who they took in the 6th round. But I also think that they're going to add a veteran at some point to go along with Chris Evans. Once they get a look at him, maybe they realize maybe he's not totally up to snuff as the second running back in this offense. They still have Trayvon Williams, who they drafted a couple of years ago. But here's a list right now who's still available on the waiver wire, so to speak, for free agent running backs. There's some legitimate dudes that could cut into Joe Mixon's workload. And Todd Gurley, Duke Johnson, Rex Burkhead, Dion Lewis, DeAndre Washington, a lot of these guys have third down ability that can contribute in the passing game and take over for the role that Gio Bernard wasn't very effective in last year. Gio Bernard wasn't very good last year, so that's probably why they cut him, not necessarily because they're just going to give Joe Mixon a huge workload.
Yeah, can we stop pretending like the majority of last year, everybody was saying, oh yeah, just give Mixon the opportunity. Zach Taylor, what are you doing? Why isn't Mixon on the field? Mixon was number 2 in opportunity share in the NFL at 81% of the opportunities for the Bengals backfield in those 6 games he played last year. The problem has never been his share of the workload in that backfield. It's really been how they deploy their running backs. And quite frankly, again, we're talking about a guy who legitimately, people are going to say, oh, he was RB10 on points per game last year. He had one game where he actually did anything that was at least making you a pleased fantasy owner. This guy had 145 opportunities in those 6 games, and he had one total finish as a top 15 running back, and that was the week where he scored 3 total touchdowns. Can we stop pushing this fugazi that Joe Mixon is this elite talent? Because quite frankly, he's been in the NFL for 4 years now. When has he ever proven that he is an elite talent? People want to cite this all the time because they loved him in college. Let's stop. He's not that top 5 upside back that everybody wants to say he is.
Right. And you talked about how they deploy him. The Bengals run the ball at a very low rate in terms of amongst the entire NFL. Inside the 10-yard line, they rank 27th in the NFL with a 43% rate of rushing, only 29 total rushing attempts. And that obviously includes all the running backs and any wide receiver stuff that they do or any quarterback runs. So inside the 10, they're not using this guy. And that's evidenced by the fact that Joe Mixon has never had double-digit touchdowns in his entire career, despite, being a pretty effective guy in that area on the field. And they also pass the ball to the running backs at a league average rate, despite for the past 3 years having two good pass-catching running backs in Joe Mixon and Gio Bernard. You'd think they would throw the ball a lot more to their running backs. They just never did. Didn't happen last year with Joe Burrow, even though we saw him use Clyde Edwards-Helaire at LSU. Then there's Mixon as a player. You already touched on it. Here are his weekly finishes this past year. When he was healthy last year in the 6 games, he finished RB46, RB27, RB33, RB1 when he had a 40-point week, RB23, and RB8. So he had 2 games where he was a top 10 running back. And that RB23 game in week 5, he legitimately had 32 opportunities that game. He had 8 targets and 24 carries. How are you not finishing as a top 10 running back in that week? This is the problem with Joe Mixon. He's so inconsistent. With that kind of volume, you have to be able to produce. And this is the point. Everybody is going to assume that his volume is going to go up. I'm here to tell you it's always been high. Last year, the year before, it's always been a high value player. But until all of this happens, until he can put it all together, which I don't think is ever going to happen, because as you said, he's been in the league for 4 years now. I don't hate Joe Mixon. The volume should be safe, but the problem is that he's going at the RB12 right now, which is about where I think his ceiling is, or about the range of outcomes I think he's going to finish. Maybe RB10 is the type of ceiling we can see for Joe Mixon, but his floor is so much lower because of the injuries, because of the inefficiency, because of the inconsistencies that he's shown, on top of the fact that 81% opportunity share that he had last year, it's pretty hard to repeat, even with Gio Bernard's departure to the Tampa Bay Bucks. And on top of all of this, he starts the season with the Vikings, who've improved their run defense. They got their opt-out back in Michael Pierce, and Danielle Hunter was hurt last year.
And they signed Dalvin Tomlinson as well, one of the best run stuffing noses in the league, to go along with Michael Pierce. They are not going to be pushed around on that line of scrimmage. And quite frankly, not only are they not going to get pushed around on the line of scrimmage, that Bengals interior offensive line ain't pushing shit around.
Right. And they also played the Bears in week 2 and the Steelers in week 3. So like I said, every single year we're week 3 with Joe Mixon. Everybody's freaking out because he's terrible. I would say just don't draft the guy. Just trade for him after 3 weeks, because his schedule eases up. And that's exactly what I did last year. The league that I won my championship in, I didn't draft Joe Mixon, but I traded Aaron Jones, who just scored a 40-point week the previous week. I traded Aaron Jones for Joe Mixon and A.J. Brown. And you know what I did after Joe Mixon had a 40-point week? I traded him too, because that's the way I play fantasy. I trade a lot. And Joe Mixon to me is just a guy that screams, don't draft him, trade for him later, because everybody's going to be fed up with the guy early in the season.
And can we quickly mention the fact that, yes, he had the opportunity here last year. People are going to say, well, what about previous years? Well, let's just go to say he had one really good, really efficient year. And that was all the way back in 2018, because in those 14 games, he had nearly 4.9 yards per carry, 9 total touchdowns, and in general, 292 opportunities. He was very good, very efficient running back. However, the injuries have crept in since then. He has not played the same on the field. Even in 2019, he was awful for the first 10 weeks of the season, then really picked it up at the end when the Bengals really had nothing to play for. And then last year, even in the games he was healthy, not even taking the fact that he did, miss the rest of the season after the first 6 games, he was not that same player. So overall, people just want to push this guy up every year, saying, oh, the volume has to go up. Just finally, they're going to recognize the talent that Joe Mixon is. He's going to get 80, 85, 90 targets. It's not going to happen. If it was going to happen, it would already have by now. So, that's enough of Joe Mixon. He just kind of makes me sick at the fact that we were talking about earlier this offseason. We're like, oh, you know what? 3rd, 4th round, maybe if he falls there, we'll be fine with Mixon there. No. People wanted to push him all the way.
He was being drafted last year, despite being injured. I totally thought recency bias would hit him, and he'd be a 3rd-round pick. And then, this is exactly where he was going last year. And it's not like they upgraded their offensive line with Riley Reef. They didn't even add that many. Yeah, and Jackson Carman, they didn't really do much to change the situation. Yeah, they drafted Jamar Chase, which will take away some attention from him. But this is a pass-heavy offense. It's a pass-heavy offense in the red zone, like I said, and they don't really pass to their running backs. So as far as I'm concerned, Joe Mixon is an RB2 and a high-end RB2, but I want to treat him as such. That's not where he's being treated right now.
I'll just say one more thing. I love how everybody cites, Gio Bernard is gone. That means Joe Mixon's going to get a shitload of targets. They just drafted a top 5 wide receiver to already add to a really good performing rookie last year, and a guy who's automatic in the slot with Tyler Boyd. They have 3 substantial wide receiver 1/2s on that team. Like, are we really going to pump up his receiving potential as the fourth option in that offense? Like, stop.
Yeah. And like honestly, I said, I totally expect them to add a running back. All right, that's enough about Joe Mixon. Let's move on to another running back who the fantasy community is also very smitten with.
Yeah, and let's talk about James Robinson, whose current ADP is 75, right on the dot, RB29. Just for the record, we were doing the top 75 overall in terms of bust, and he barely cracked this list. But even at 75, like let's take it easy, guys. Let's take it easy. This one should be relatively easy to explain, as you guys can imagine. But man, like James Robinson, truthers truly need to let him go. This is why we load up on RBs early. We don't want to get into this RB dead zone where we have to take James Robinson in the freaking edge of the 6th round. Why would I ever be intrigued to take James Robinson over some of the wide receivers in this range, such as Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, Corey Davis, Laviska Shenault, Michael Pittman, Antonio Brown? And before anybody really argues as James Robinson haters, because let's be honest, there's going to be people out there say, oh, you're including James Robinson because you hate him. He was a stud last year, yada, yada, yada. We're not needing to fill an agenda here for a guy who finishes a top 5 back last year. Yes, he was a good running back last year. The situation has dramatically changed around him. This is a whole new regime and a whole new offense in Jacksonville, and one that, quite frankly, will not put much stock into a former undrafted free agent that they didn't coop themselves. For reference, James Robinson did what he did last year on the insane usage that he had for a lost season by the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2020, as you guys can see on the screen. He had the second highest opportunity share in the entire NFL at 85.1% or 85.2%. Sorry. That opportunity share is not only a lock to go down, we may flat out see it cut in half by next year with the addition of Travis Etienne in the backfield. Now, let's talk about Etienne, the player. You guys all know already that we love Etienne as a prospect, as a talent, and they ended up taking him at that 25th overall pick. Let's talk about the receiving role that he can coop right away. Travis Etienne led college football in receptions this past season and has already worked extensively in the receiving game for the team this offseason in training camp. And guess this, unites with his former college quarterback. The third round role is his. Like there's no debate. There's no argument. James Robinson is not going to be on the field on third down. That is going to be Travis Etienne. And people want to automatically assume, oh, James Robinson, at least he's going to get the red zone goal line role. Like he's the bigger back. This should be his role, 2-down banger goal line. But Travis Etienne has actually been one of the most efficient red zone backs we've seen in college football for the last 3 years. You guys can see inside the 10, this past season for Travis Etienne, he had 18 total attempts and 8 touchdowns for a 45% touchdown conversion rate. Inside the 20, 23 attempts, 10 touchdowns. And in 2019, actually had 26 attempts for 9 touchdowns with 11 tackles broken inside the red zone. This is no slouch when it comes to getting the ball in the end zone. This is why Corey comped him to Aaron Jones, for example. He may be a slimmer back, but he knows how to get his nose in the end zone. This is a guy who, when you enter inside that 20-yard line, Etienne is not going to come off the field simply because the coach says, oh, you know what? James Robinson has about 10 pounds on him. Let's just take Etienne off. That's not going to happen. With James Robinson, we're looking, in my opinion, at best, a 10 to 12 touch per game type banger for an offense that will not see many scoring opportunities to begin with. Why are we taking him in the 6th round right now? He'll lose his most valuable touches to Etienne, and in general won't have the sufficient offense or sufficient volume to really be able to make up for it. So the fact that even at RB, he's going ahead of guys like Raheem Mostert, Damon Harris, Melvin Gordon, and the Tampa backs right now, and Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones should be illegal, quite frankly. Is he going to finish in this fringe RB range or RB3 range? Yeah, most likely, barring an injury. This is shooting your 6th round pick into the oblivion for a guy that simply lacks any real significant upside. Hopefully you shipped him off in Dynasty before that draft, because you could have gotten a 22 first round pick now. That's not going to happen. This is a guy who is done. He's nothing. He's worthless.
Right. And when you talk about upside, you're looking at guys going around him, not necessarily going after him, but the upside of a guy like Chase Claypool, the upside of a guy like Deebo Samuel, even Will Fuller, who we saw his upside last year. There's just no reason to take a mid-round running back like this. Like, this is a completely muddy situation. Even if, let's say, Robinson is able to stave off Etienne on the ground for a few weeks, how valuable is that to your fantasy team? Is that going to be more valuable to your fantasy team than the potential of a guy like Chase Claypool to break into top 12 wide receiver range, which me and you both believe he has the talent and the ability to be able to do? There's just no reason to waste a pick on James Robinson, in my opinion. I'm completely surprised that he's going this high still. I have no idea why. It's probably the people that, don't like Travis Etienne for whatever reason. I have no idea why, but he's a guy that everybody just hated on for no reason, and they nitpicked the living crap out of his game because he was so good for so long in college. It was just like Jonathan Taylor last year, honestly. People did the same thing with him. And that opportunity share, as you mentioned, that's the key thing, right? Like if anybody thinks there's still that slight chance that James Robinson holds off this backfield, he can only hold it off to a certain degree. Like there is no way he would ever hold off Etienne to an 85.2% opportunity share. It's not possible. It's not possible with a first round running back for a UDFA who was on a 1-15 team last year that basically was just like, we're tanking, screw it, give this guy all the work. That's what happened in Jacksonville.
Yep. No, fully agree. So with that being said, you can head into the next player and Chris Carson.
Yeah. So we're going full running back hatred mode right now. So Chris Carson right now is our third bust of this video. He is currently being picked 34th overall as the RB19. And to me, Chris Carson's the quintessential guy that we talk about, and you already touched on it with James Robinson. Why we draft running backs early. I like Chris Carson, right? Chris Carson's a fine running back. I think he can be a solid, mid RB2 for your team, maybe a late RB2. But am I willing to spend a third-round pick on Chris Carson? Absolutely not. Hell the fuck no. I would never spend a third-round pick on Chris Carson. Here's the simple answer why I wouldn't spend a third-round pick on Carson. Here's who's going around him in Chris Carson. Michael Thomas, Darren Waller, Patrick Mahomes, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb, Julio Jones, DJ Moore, and Chris Godwin. The guys that I just mentioned aren't not only going around him, that's like the rest of the fourth round too. So to me, if I'm looking at this, I'm looking at a guy who probably should be a late fourth, early fifth round pick rather than the late third round ADP that he's being drafted as. And when you look at Carson himself, here's why he should be picked there. Prior to last season, we had a sample where Chris Carson averaged about 17.6 carries per game in 2018, 18.5 carries per game in 2019. Last year, we saw him only average 11.8 carries per game. Honestly, he got a modest uptick in targets. It's like 0.5 more targets per game. But to me, he lost a big time chunk of that groundwork. And I think that's going to continue because we saw Carlos Hyde really cut into his workload last year. And we have Rashad Penny returning from injury, a guy who, while he's not like the most talented running back in the world, he's probably about as good as Carlos Hyde and should be able to command a good share of the groundwork at the least. And this is a team that has always shown the ability to look for depth to their backfield. I already talked about the veterans with Joe Mixon. I could totally see the Seahawks adding another running back like a Todd Gurley or something stupid like that, just to their backfield, just to have some depth, because we've seen Chris Carson, and I'm about to get into it in a second, not be able to stay healthy in his career. From a talent perspective too, we also have a guy that is just not that great of a running back. Like he's ranked number 24 in juke rate last year, number 40 in yards created per touch, number 30 in fantasy points per opportunity. He's an above average running back, but he's not a world beater. He's not even as talented as Joe Mixon is. And when you look at Chris Carson's injury history, this is probably why the Seahawks are always looking to add more running backs to their backfield. In the last 2 years alone, he had a mid-foot sprain in week 7. He had an MCL sprain in week 3. And then 2 years ago, he had a hip fracture at the end of the season, shoulder sprain. And then in 2018, he had another hip sprain. This is a guy that suffers a lot of nagging injuries. And maybe it's bad luck. Maybe it's, whatever you want to call it. But the way this guy runs, he runs hard. He runs a little reckless at times. And he's going to be a guy that is you're just praying doesn't get hurt. And we've seen it over and over again. This guy leaves games early all the time, and that absolutely sinks your fantasy lineup. So another thing that's not in his favor too is the rushing defenses that he's going to have to play the first 8 weeks of the season. As I mentioned with Joe Mixon, the Vikings defense got better. So of the defenses that he's going to have to play in the first 7 weeks of the season, not really any of them are very favorable rushing defenses to be playing against. And I don't mind him. Like I said, I don't mind Chris Carson as a fifth round pick if you're going to look for an RB3 flex spot in your roster. But a third round price is simply way too steep for me to pay, given the receivers, the tight end that you're probably going to be able to get there. And even some of the quarterbacks, I'd rather take Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen over Chris Carson. I don't even like taking quarterbacks early.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And even you mentioned he's currently going above David Montgomery, I believe, correct?
Yep.
I would much prefer David Montgomery to him. And that just kind of goes to show that once people realize that all the running backs kind of go in those first 2 rounds, they will reach on middling type RB2 talents. And to be honest, that is what Chris Carson is. Like people are going to take this guy in the 3rd round because quite simply, RB is going to be their biggest need. That's going to happen. And To avoid that, you just get at least one locked and loaded bell cow or two really good high upside guys at the end of the first and second round. So, I fully agree. Carson is overvalued comparatively to what would be on the board at that point. So, anyways, we can shear off of the RB position. We just talked about three guys at the same position. So let's get into another guy. And this has nothing to do with talent, okay? I love Jamar Chase. I think Jamar Chase is a freaking stud. I think he's a top 15 dynasty wide receiver. I think the future is bright for him. We could be looking at a guy who, quite frankly, could become a perennial 1,300-yard, 8-touchdown receiver. But at his current ADP going into his rookie season of 48.5 in the wide receiver 20 off the board, we need to pump the brakes. Like, rookie fever, it's making its way into best ball currently. Like, how in the heck is Jamar Chase right now in his rookie season finding his way into that fourth round over the likes of Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, Cooper Kupp, Kenny Golladay, Deontay Johnson, his teammate T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton, even Odell Beckham, Chase Claypool, DJ Chark? Like, these are all guys that should be going ahead of Jamar Chase. So overall, like, Jamar Chase should be nearing that fringe wide receiver 30 type range, maybe a little bit above that. Instead, he's going at wide receiver 20. There is absolutely no margin of error right now if you're taking Jamar Chase in your best ball drafts. And I fully understand he has incredible upside to make up and make me look foolish saying that the ADP is too high. But you just leave yourself no room of error. You're fully banking on this offense taking the next step towards a high-powered passing volume offense as soon as this year. However, there's just so much risk going involved with it. With Burrow coming off of injury, what if he starts out slow? Like, what if the first few games, Joe Burrow isn't really himself, takes a little bit of time to really get back to Joe Burrow form that we saw last year? He has two other established receivers on the team, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. What type of market share could we really expect from Jamar right away? Is he going to be a 15%, 20%, 25%? We don't know yet because, quite frankly, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, are nothing to sneeze at. And finally, I mean, with an offensive line that struggled last season and only really added Jackson Carman and Riley Reef to that group, can we fully expect this offense to consistently move the ball down the field despite the porous offensive line? At this point in the draft, I'll take any of those established wide receivers I mentioned above Chase, including T. Higgins. T. Higgins is going to be that number one this year. I'll already etch it in stone. As much as I love Jamar Chase, can we not ignore the fact that T. Higgins is coming off a near 1,000-yard receiving season despite playing with Jeff Driscoll for the final 6 weeks of the season? He should be, in my opinion, Jamar Chase should be closer to around a 6th-round pick. That's probably where I'd be willing to take him. But the fact that he's already worked into the 4th round literally gives you no margin of error, as I mentioned.
Yeah, and I think this is an ADP that is probably not going to go down too, right? Because the more we hear about Jamar Chase, looking great in training camp and see him in preseason games and stuff like that, he's going to go high. Like, it's just the way that Jamar Chase, he's top 5 overall pick. It's a guy that's going to go high in drafts. And the same thing's probably going to happen with Kyle Pitts too. So this is something that I'm willing to miss out on Jamar Chase for that price. If he, like you said, if he's a 6th, 7th round pick, then I'm definitely willing to make the leap and try and take him there. But at this point, you're passing up guys that are so safe for volume and safe for targets and have quite a bit of upside themselves, right? You got Chase Claypool. Is Chase Claypool's upside higher than Jamar Chase's? It might be. Like, honestly, he might be more upside for this season we're talking about, not for Dynasty. We might have more upside with Chase Claypool this year than we do with Jamar Chase. Same goes for, Tyler Lockett.
Cooper Kupp.
There's a chance that Tyler Lockett absolutely, returns to the form that he was at early in the season with the Seahawks offense. Cooper Kupp, Kenny Golladay, these guys all have top 12 upside. And Jamar Chase, sure, he has top 12 upside, but in order for him to get there, a lot of things have to go right. And a 4th round ADP is not a pick that I want to be spending on a guy that needs to have a lot of things go right for him to return value.
For reference, everybody will say, yes, CeeDee Lamb. I love CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb had such a great rookie season, right? He finished as the wide receiver 32 in PPR. And yes, were you happy with CeeDee Lamb this year? You're probably happy given the cost of acquisition that it took to get CeeDee Lamb going into the year. But if you spent a 4th round pick on Jamar Chase and he ended up having a 935-yard, 5-touchdown season, PPR wide receiver 32 type season, you spent a 4th round pick on that, you're probably not going to be too happy. And in general, CeeDee Lamb had one of the better rookie years that we've seen in quite some time. If you are taking Jamar Chase in his current cost, you're expecting him to be more so in that Justin Jefferson type of vein for a rookie year. You're expecting 1,200 plus yards, 7 plus touchdowns in order for him to return value there.
That's what Cooper Kupp's going to give you. That's what Tyler Lockett's going to give you. That's what Deontay Johnson should give you, potentially even more than that. That's what T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, all these guys can give you that output, and I expect it from most of those guys because I think mid-round receivers, and we're going to talk about this at length in the offseason, these are the guys that help you win leagues because these guys break from guys with a few question marks into superstars. That's what we saw with Metcalf last year. It's what we saw with AJ Brown last year. It's what we saw with Calvin Ridley last year. So I can't do it with Jamar Chase. I can't put him that high. I can't put him ahead of guys that are that established. I could do it over, we get to the bottom of this list with DJ Chark. I could take Jamar Chase over DJ Chark. That makes sense to me, but I can't even do it with Chase Claypool or Odell Beckham, to be honest.
Agreed. Fully. So, any closing thoughts before we head out of here?
No, we should be good. Like I said, if you guys enjoyed this, we're getting into some redraft content now. Like, comment, subscribe. I know a lot of you guys were itching for some redraft content. Maybe you don't play Dynasty. It's not for everybody, but hopefully you guys are going to be satisfied because next week we got our redraft rankings, our first batch of redraft rankings, and we're going to get into a lot of interesting debates. I'm sure Joe Mixon's name is going to come up again at some point in the redraft rankings episode, and people are going to get mad about that. But we will direct them to this video because we gave a full Joe Mixon spiel at this point. So if you guys enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord if you haven't already done so. Peace out and enjoy your Wednesday.
Peace out.